We go. We ready? This is it. Hey, folks. Brian Haugli here. A special CISO Life daily discussion at the home studio. Figured I'd get into something a little different, and yeah, let's get into it. Hey, good morning. Another beautiful day. It is Friday, October 7th, and we are live. Special addition to today's show. Right after this, we will be launching into a LinkedIn audio event. And what that means is you'll be able to hit the event off of my page. Maybe you've seen it in the feed. You'll be able to join that audio event where we're going to discuss today's episode. That's going to go off at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard. So that's exactly 30 minutes from here. So ideally, I'll keep this under 30 minutes, and we will have an enjoyable discussion right after this and the LinkedIn audio event. I don't think I've seen that. I thought it was a kind of a cool combination. Let's do a live, and then let's start talking about it. I'd love to hear your feedback. So if you've been following along this week on the daily discussion, I've posted a number of things out there that I've been looking to discuss. And just because we're in the new studio setup, I want to bring those up here. So forgive me for all the cool transitions and whatnot, but here's what we've got going on. First off, we have the cyber criminals see a lure in BEC attacks. This is definitely a very interesting new dynamic where attackers are actually seeing the payoffs are out of BEC and not ransomware. So, think about it, right? We stepped up inside of the US, tried to force and position people to not pay their ransom, foreshadowing, right, to a little bit later on in this episode about a topic we're going to discuss that's been very relevant in recent news. How does BEC work? Well, basically, you've got a provider who has a email account, and there is some type of a, transfer of dollars going from the people that you think to the people that you expect, right? Well, a BEC attack ends up either moving into you as the source or the destination's email box, pretending to be the other person, and then diverting funds to somebody else. It's actually quite simple. It's a basic fraud, but is a very interesting kind of concept. And apparently, it's picking up. And I would see why, right? If you're doing a traditional ransomware, you've got to hold hostage. You've got to break in. You've got to hold hostage the network, the systems that are in place. You have to then expect that the person who is under ransomware, right, is going to pay, right? You've got to set up that whole mechanism. There's back and forth. Are they going to pay? Do they have the ability to recover from backup? So I can understand why BEC is now becoming more prevalent, because all you're doing is compromising an email box, masquerading as one of the individuals in the transaction, and then diverting actual cash to something that you control. So the payoff is almost guaranteed if you can compromise the communication path, right? You're not waiting to see if somebody will actually pay you, right? You're actually diverting real funds. This happens a lot with money going into escrow. This happens quite a bit with money that is moving in towards bank transfers, right? Happens a lot when you're paying a vendor, you're paying a claim. Saw this in insurance quite a bit. It was very interesting. So seeing the rise in BEC, because criminals aren't dumb, folks. I don't know why everyone keeps thinking this. Then this is not just some kid in their mom's basement. All right, these folks are motivated. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. They are set up and structured like a business. They have HR, they have payroll. These people go on holiday and vacation. All right, they are motivated. There is a return on investment for what they are doing. So it definitely makes sense that now we see a uplift in folks undergoing a BEC attacks over ransomware. So, maybe it's time to get back to patching those Exchange servers and putting in protections over your email authentication, as well as old school two-party, concepts on authorization. Why does one person have the ability inside of an organization to authorize a payment? Shouldn't it be a two-party system, right? Somebody sets it up, somebody approves it. Maybe even there's a third check in place. There's nothing wrong with this. Yes, it'll slow things down, but how much is $1 million worth to you in your organization? It's probably actually worth more than $1 million. So taking a look at some really basic principles, fundamental protocols, programs to put in place are the obvious methods to combat this. So shout out to Amez. Thank you. Thanks for listening, and thanks for everybody else. Drop your comments down below, and let me hear what you say. I've got another one. BEC's been on the scene for a while. Yes, it has, but it's been overshadowed by ransomware. Obviously, right? It's kind of a hype cycle thing within the news, right? Much of BEC can be prevented by having a defined process that requires an output out-of-band communications. Exactly what I was saying, right? Having two-party systems, having three-party systems in place to be able to authorize when the dollars actually get moved. And voice verify, physically verify. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually call somebody on a known good number, right? Great comments, guys. Thank you so much, guys and girls. Thanks, Kevin. Good stuff. Shout out to my our friends in the FBI and former FBI who are out there trying to keep us safe. If you don't know your field office point of contact and you're running an operation inside of, anywhere in the United States, get to know your FBI, your Secret Service field office, have those people as part of your incident response plan. I mean, it all just ties together, folks, right? Let's see what we got here. Next one, hidden costs to business of overlooking data privacy and cybersecurity and ESG. Let me bring that back up for everybody. If you're not following along, you can hit and find the Feedly link to all of these on any of my posts. You'll be able to see it off here. This has the link. You'll be able to follow all the articles that I've been discussing. So the significant drivers for business risk are growing concern among investors and CEOs. Thank God, right? Public costs of poor corporate cybersecurity management are incredibly increasing, viewed as market failures. Well, that would make sense. And that's probably another foreshadowing to our next story, which we're going to get to and probably spend quite a bit of time on. So, organizations look at ESG, right? They look at privacy. They look at all of these things. Cyber being part of that is definitely a great component of a board discussion and very well should be, right? Rising cyber rates are part of a discussion, right? So having this lumped in at the board level, and if you're following me, I'll talk about what we can pull from the enterprise, what we can pull from the larger organizations, but by no means do you have to do that, right? There's no requirement that you have to do exactly what they are doing, but you should be able to adopt some things from them. So talking about cybersecurity, right, and having that as part of the same conversations that you would around environmental, social, and governance issues within larger organizations, that scales really well down into smaller organizations. There's no reason you can't be discussing cyber as a horizon risk or a current risk, right? And, are you talking about it with your board? Are you talking about it with the C-suite? Is anybody asking about it? If they're not asking about it, there's really not a better time to then start bringing it up as an enterprise level risk, as an operational risk, not as an IT level risk for your organization to start discussing it. I honestly don't know today who doesn't think about cybersecurity as a risk from a business standpoint. So if no one's talking about it inside of your organization, I don't know. Maybe you just don't have attuned business leaders at that organization to be able to really discuss what's going on, what matters, what risks are on the horizon. All right, let's get into our showpiece discussion that I wanted to bring up and I was kind of hitting on earlier. Former Uber CSO convicted for covering up massive 2016 data theft, right? This is going to be a very polarizing event within the security community, and you're going to quickly understand that I'm taking a side, and I have no problem with that. So Joe Sullivan, former CSO at Uber, and now, I don't know if Cloudflare's let them go, but currently the CISO at Cloudflare, because after he was let go and fired from Uber for his actions that stemmed or led to this conviction, Cloudflare picked him up and hired him as their CISO. Now, while Joe is a very smart person based on his resume and his background, I really have to start questioning Cloudflare's I don't know, decision making on bringing that type of a potential problem into their own house. So what's going on with this? Why is this so polarizing? On one hand, you have a tremendous amount of CISOs and other security practitioners who are just like, this guy's being scapegoated. Why isn't the CEO being indicted? The former CEO, the culture there was crazy. It bred this. It's not his fault. He's being, led out. And I have to. It feels like there's so much discussion around why him and where the responsibility lies outside of him that no one looks at what did he do. Now, listen, I'm not a lawyer. I don't even try to pretend to be one on TV. But when I look at what I read and what I followed with the case, here's what I understand. California has disclosure of breach rules, right? Federal laws have rules around obstructing justice and withholding information and covering things up. When I look at what happened with what he did and the way that they outlined exactly how the series of events happened, what I understand is that hackers found a vulnerability, then contacted him. He and his team or whomever used their existing bug bounty program to pay off the hackers who were expecting or putting in a ransom. That does not follow what bug bounty programs are supposed to be doing or set up to go do, right? Those are, you find an issue, you submit it to the bug bounty program, it's reviewed, you're paid if it's a hit, and something's going to be done about it. It's legitimate, right? I think what came out of this and what he was convicted of, right? And we will now, wait to see what the sentencing looks like. And obviously he can have his next day in court to be able to have an appeal. And as a citizen of this great country, he is completely entitled to go do that. But right now he's convicted of these two things, facing up to 8 years in prison. So as a CISO, right, myself, I've been a chief information security officer. I'm in a position where I have to make decisions. Even if my CEO is telling me, we're not going to talk about that, we're not going to disclose that. Well, guess what? I have legal obligations myself. Joe's a pretty smart guy. He obviously was able to get a stellar job even after being fired from Uber underneath suspicion that this was going to happen. So there really shouldn't be of a concern of, well, if I say something to Travis and the CEO, or if I disclose this publicly, I'm going to lose my job as the CSO of Uber. I'm sorry, that just doesn't stand with a pedigree like this, right? So do you have enough fortitude and the ability to be able to stand back and say, hey, this is wrong, I'm going to do the right thing, right? This guy's a former federal prosecutor, for Christ's sake, okay? Sorry to swear, but I mean, you should know better. So I don't get into the camp of poor Joe, okay? Unfortunately. When you look at the CISO role and what you're supposed to do, this is very much in line with it. Something bad happened to Uber. There was technically a breach. There was an extortion going on. That right there is a crime. Breach is bad. Extortion is worse. Uber should have collectively, or at least Joe, as the leader of the cybersecurity program, should have notified authorities that they were being extorted, should have notified the authorities that they had a breach. It's compounded by the fact that they were already underneath investigation by the FTC for a previous breach. And now, of course, Uber's got a great track record, right? You just followed my How Did Uber Get Breached YouTube, 2 weeks ago. People's comments and feedback on that is like, oh, seriously, again? Who rides in these cars? Anyway, it's a terrible thing, right? But I'm still, everything I've just said, still not in the camp of poor Joe. He didn't do anything wrong. Sorry, and we've seen this on a couple other people's posts. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. I love that saying. Whoever came up with that, I mean, thank you. This is an area that is obviously going to have a lot of attention, okay? But I don't think the right attention is that the CISO is a scapegoat. The CISO is in a bad position in an organization. The CISO is now in a compromised, role by its definition for most organizations. I think that's crazy. Okay, it's just not a position that I think people need to think about that role, why they should or shouldn't take that role, okay? If you are an honest individual, if you follow the programs you build, if you are following the regulations that you are supposed to be following as an organization, problems like this will not be yours. Plain and simple, okay? Follow the rules, follow the regulations, follow the program, and follow your ethics. Most of us in this industry, say what you want about certifications or not, swore that we would follow ethic and moral guidelines when we became CISSP or CISMs or any of the other things, right? It's attached to it. The role is about integrity, okay? It's about trust. And it's very interesting that I picked up that the new CEO who came into Uber, his parting comment in a number of these different quotes and interviews was about Joe Sullivan, I did not trust the man. When the CEO does not trust your CISO, that should tell you something. Sorry. Well, I think I've beaten that one up enough. I'm really looking forward to the audio event right after this, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard. So that's in 14 minutes from right now. We're going to have a LinkedIn audio event. I will not be able to put the link in this, but do scroll over to my page. If you're following me, you'll be able to see the event for that happening. Click on that, get into the audio event. We'll kick that off at 9:30 a.m. Let's go to some questions because it's a very, very active board over here. And I'm juggling in between two systems to be able to read what is going on. So apologies, everyone. Arnez, I'm sorry, I called you Amez. I couldn't read that well earlier. Some great comments about what's going on. What's your thoughts on data brokers selling everyone's contact credentials? Yeah, that's terrible. What are we going to do about it? I mean, if we can criminalize it and knock them down, I mean, we should be able to go do that. But it seems like it's not that different than like Zoom Info or Crunchbase. So, what about the board? Deborah asks. Legal. Who decided not to hide this? That's a great question. I didn't read the transcripts from the courthouse, nor was I there. But that's something that I think people will definitely dig into a little bit more on, well, who else is culpable, right? I think the immunity has been thrown around as something that people have been looking at and talking about for other individuals, maybe to then use to, that was granted, maybe to then be able to use against Joe, who knows? Let's see here. Okay, makes more sense. The reality is your CEO, Deborah writes, your CEO will override the CISO as far as doing the right thing. He should have been a whistleblower. Completely agree. Paying through a bug bounty is wrong. Were there discussions internally not to announce, and by whom? I have to believe yes. I've worked at a Fortune 500 as a CISO. We've had, and I've seen instances of issues that were reportable, that we reported. There wasn't a discussion that happened before we reported that didn't involve the C-suite. Most organizations operate that way. So if the CISO is operating in that much of a silo, you have to really question the dynamics of that organization's senior leadership. If the CEO is telling the CISO, hey, you take care of it, we're not releasing this, that should be a red flag about that organization's leadership to the CISO. And that person should be making an honest decision about their employment and their future role at that organization. You should be working with general counsel. You should be doing, look, FTC was already investigating Uber. Black cloud over Uber. Got that, right? This then happens during that time. I can understand why probably everybody is sitting around going, okay, let's not talk about this. We don't need another bad thing happening right now. But we don't know if that actually happened. But what we do know is Joe took certain actions that led to what we've now seen happen, and he's been convicted for it. Would I still go take a new CISO role? Sure would. Would I do things the way I've been doing them? Yep. Will I use this as a way to remind me what to do right and what to do wrong? You betcha. Am I leaving side channel? Not a chance. I love this way too much. And I love what we do for our clients way too much. And this is actually a very impactful and very important type of message for those folks in the vCISO space as consultants into organizations as a third party. We should now be looking at what do our MSAs actually look like with our clients? What are our protections that are in place? Are we having a escalation path within our client to be able to make these decisions? What are third parties going to be held accountable for when things like this happen, right? So I say that because SideChannel is a vCISO firm. This is all we do. We work with well over 60 clients building out security programs as their fractional vCISO. So I've got 60 different clients in which we have to think about this across our entire delivery team. Now, what's very interesting, I think, is within that space is the regulations that require a CISO, which I love. Okay, you should probably have somebody at the helm. Totally makes sense. But regulations like New York State DFS allow for a third party to actually be in that role. So it's going to be very, I don't know, telling over time how those regulations adopt the outcome as everyone's looking at this case on what that's going to mean. And now couple in insurance providers, D&O, professional lines, personal lines insurance for professionals like this going into this role. And what is that going to mean for the future of the role itself? So this isn't the end. I think it's just the beginning. It's the first shot across the bow, if you will, of what's going to happen with the role itself. But like I said before, I'm not shying away from ever taking something like this. And I'm sure not shying away from the ability to deliver services like this through the firm that we've been building and delivering it to clients. And I honestly think if you've got the ethics and the morals and you've got a good head on your shoulders and you've got the experience, this is something that is going to drift by you and not be impactful. So just some advice, and we'll talk about it on the audio in about 10 minutes. Don't worry too much about what does this mean for you as a CISO, but let's go to some other questions we have. This is great. Yeah, Deborah, perfect. If your company isn't doing due diligence, then leave. Yeah. I know it's tough for people to leave organizations. It's always tough for people to have to seek new employment, especially in this market, especially when you're looking for jobs like this. But you have to ask yourself, do you want to continue to work for bad people, unethical people? The answer should be no, you shouldn't. Jameson, O'Reilly, post the transcripts. That's linked right there. Thank you so much. That is awesome. You can definitely take a look at that in whatever spare time I have over the weekend. So with that, folks, I am going to cut this because we're going to switch over to the audio event in about 8 minutes. So grab the link on the event page off of my profile. If I can tag it in here very quickly, I will. But the event is set up. It is the 10/7 daily discussion. We will be on there shortly. This is Brian Haugli with CISO Life, sponsored by SideChannel. You can check me out anywhere on Twitter. You can follow, if you're watching this right now, on LinkedIn. You know where to follow me on LinkedIn, but we're obviously over on YouTube. All of our content originally goes over there first, and then we bring things over onto LinkedIn. So if you want the early access to anything that we're publishing and putting out, check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. As always, be safe, be good. I'll catch you next time. Thanks.